Ida Bell Wells helped women win the right to vote. She organized, she marched, and she fought for decades to make it happen. On August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment became law. Women across America celebrated their victory at last. But when Election Day came, Ida B. Wells and millions of black women like her were told they still could not use their right. The victory she had fought for would take another 45 years to actually arrive. This is her story of defiance and courage. This is the story of the woman who refused to wait in the back of a parade, in the back of history, in the back of America. Ida Bell Wells was born on July 16, 1862, in Holly Springs, Mississippi, 6 months before the Emancipation. She was born into slavery. Her parents, James and Elizabeth Wells, were both enslaved on the same plantation in Mississippi. When Union troops captured Holly Springs in 1863, baby Ida was freed. She would have no memory of being enslaved. But her parents never let her forget what they had endured. Her mother carried whipping scars on her back for the rest of her life. After the war, James Wells became a carpenter and a trustee at a local college. He refused to vote Democrat despite the threats. Ida was the eldest of 8 children in the Wells family. She enrolled at Shaw University, now called Rust College, at 16. Then, in 1878, yellow fever swept through Mississippi. It killed both her parents and her infant baby brother. Ida had been visiting her grandmother when it happened. She came home to find 3 fresh graves waiting for her in the yard. She was just 16 years old. Friends and relatives wanted to split up her 5 surviving younger siblings among themselves. Ida refused to let them separate her family. She lied about her age, passed the teacher's exam, and got a job to support them. At 16, Ida became a mother, a breadwinner, and the head of a household all at once. She would not let her family be torn apart. In 1882, she moved to Memphis, Tennessee for a higher-paying teaching position. Her siblings came along with her. Memphis would change everything for Ida. Not because of what she found there, but because of what she absolutely refused to accept. The year was 1884, and Ida B. Wells was about to take her very first public stand against the system of Jim Crow. In May of 1884, Ida bought a first-class train ticket from Memphis to her teaching job in Woodstock, Tennessee. She took her seat in the ladies' car as her ticket entitled her. The conductor ordered her to move to the segregated colored car. Ida refused to move. When the conductor grabbed her arm to drag her out of the seat, she bit his hand as hard as she could. It took 3 men to finally remove her from that train car. The white passengers applauded as she was thrown off the train. Ida sued the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad Company for the assault, and she won. The court awarded her $500. But in 1887, the Tennessee Supreme Court reversed the decision. The railroad company won on appeal against her. It was a crushing defeat for Ida, but it taught her something important. Courts would not save her people. Perhaps words might. She started writing columns for black newspapers under the pen name Iola. Her columns were sharp, fearless, and unapologetic. She criticized the Memphis public schools for failing black children. In response, the school board fired her from her position. So she bought a stake in a newspaper called the Memphis Free Speech and became its editor. She would not be silenced anymore. Then came March 9th, 1892. 3 of Ida's friends, including Thomas Moss, were lynched by a white mob in Memphis. Their crime was not violence or theft. It was running a successful grocery store that competed with a white-owned business nearby. Ida was devastated by their deaths, and she was furious. She began investigating lynchings across the South with fierce resolve. She discovered a terrible truth. Most lynching victims were not criminals at all. They were simply economic competition for whites. She published her explosive findings in her newspaper. The white community of Memphis responded by destroying her newspaper office. Armed white men watched her home day and night, waiting to kill her on sight. If she ever returned to Memphis, she would die. Ida moved north to save her life, first to New York City, then to Chicago. She would never live in the South again after that. In Chicago, she married attorney Ferdinand Barnett and had 4 children with him. But she never stopped fighting for her people. In 1895, she published A Red Record, a devastating statistical analysis of lynching throughout the United States. She became one of the most famous black journalists in all of America, but her biggest and most important fight was still ahead. By 1913, women across America were marching and organizing for the right to vote. But black women faced a problem. White suffrage organizations did not want them as members. The men in their own communities did not support their cause either. Black men feared that extending suffrage to women would dilute their own already tenuous voting power in a hostile white society. Ida clearly saw the danger ahead. If black women did not organize for themselves, they would be left behind by history once again. On January 30th, 1913, she founded the Alpha Suffrage Club, the first black women's suffrage group in Illinois. They met every Wednesday evening at 3005 South State Street in Chicago. Within months, they had hundreds of members. Then came an important announcement. The biggest suffrage parade in American history would march on Washington, District of Columbia. March 3rd, 1913, the day before Woodrow Wilson's inauguration as president. Over 5,000 women would march. Ida and her Alpha Suffrage Club raised money to attend the historic event. She planned to march proudly with the Illinois group, but when they arrived in Washington for the parade, they received devastating and humiliating news from the parade organizers. The parade organizers, led by suffragist Alice Paul, had a message for black women: march at the very back of the parade line, or do not march at all. Southern white women had threatened to boycott the entire parade if they saw black faces marching up front. The night before the parade, the Illinois delegation gathered together in a rehearsal hall. The tension in the room was very thick. Grace Wilbur Trout, the leader of the Illinois delegation, sided with the segregation order. Most of the white women agreed. One white woman told Ida directly, "If I were a colored woman, I would be willing to march with my own race at the back." Ida's voice trembled with emotion. 2 tears rolled down her cheek, but her words were made of steel and would not be broken. She spoke. "Either I go with you or not at all. I will not accept segregation in a march that claims to fight for equality." She continued, "I am not taking this stand because I personally wish for recognition or praise. This is about something bigger." Her final words rang out, "I am doing it for the future benefit of my whole race." Then she turned and walked out of the room. The Illinois delegation assumed she had given up on marching and gone home in defeat. They were wrong about Ida B. Wells. The next day, March 3rd, 1913, the historic parade began. 250,000 spectators lined the avenue. The Illinois delegation marched in perfect formation down Pennsylvania Avenue. Ida B. Wells was nowhere to be seen among them. Then, as the Illinois group passed by, a figure stepped out from the crowd of spectators. Ida walked calmly into the marching line. She took her place between 2 white women, Belle Squire and Virginia Brooks, and marched with her head held high in defiance. The parade made headlines across the nation. The Chicago Defender newspaper called Ida the Queen of Our Race for her courage. In 1915, the Alpha Suffrage Club helped elect Oscar DePriest as Chicago's first black alderman in the city's history. 1/3 of DePriest's winning votes came from women voters. The Alpha Suffrage Club had proven its political power in Chicago. In August 1920, the 19th Amendment was finally ratified. The right to vote shall not be denied on account of sex. Women all across America celebrated the historic victory. After 72 years of fighting and sacrifice, they had finally won. But for Black women living in the South, Election Day of 1920 told a very different and much darker story of exclusion. In Kent County, Delaware, Black women showed up to vote in unusually large numbers. Election officials turned everyone away. In Savannah, Georgia, officials cited a state law requiring voter registration 6 months before any election could take place. The 19th Amendment had only passed 10 weeks earlier. Under this interpretation, no woman in Georgia could legally vote, except the officials did not turn white women away at the polls. Only Black women were rejected and denied their right to vote. The same tactics that had stolen Black men's voting rights for 50 years would now be used against Black women just the same. Poll taxes that cost money most could not afford, literacy tests designed to be impossible, grandfather clauses, constant threats. The 19th Amendment guaranteed the right to vote on paper, but Jim Crow laws took that right away in actual practice. Let that sink in for a moment. Ida B. Wells dedicated her life to helping women win the right to vote in the United States, and then America turned around and told her she could not use that right. The victory was hollow for millions of Black women. Let us put this injustice into numbers. In Mississippi, Black voter registration dropped from 67% to just 6%. In Louisiana, 130,000 Black men were registered to vote in 1896. By 1904, only 1,000. That represents a 99% reduction in Black voters, not because they chose not to vote, but because they were blocked. The 15th Amendment gave Black men the right to vote in 1870. The 19th Amendment gave women the vote in 20. But neither amendment protected Black women from the systematic terrorism of Jim Crow voter suppression throughout the South. Yet Ida B. Wells never stopped fighting for justice. She continued organizing, writing, and speaking out until her final days. She helped elect Oscar DePriest to Congress in 1928, making him the first Black congressman since Reconstruction. In 1930, at age 68, Ida ran for the Illinois State Senate herself. She lost the election, but made history. She became the first Black woman to ever seek that office in the entire state of Illinois. She was a pioneer until the very end. She once wrote these words, "One had better die fighting against injustice than die like a dog or a rat caught in a trap." She meant every word she ever wrote or spoke. Ida B. Wells Barnett fought for justice until she drew her very final breath. On March 25, 1931, Ida B. Wells Barnett died in Chicago, Illinois. She was 68 years old. The vote she had fought for her entire life, the real vote with real power, was still 34 long years away from reality. For decades after Ida's death, Black women in the South continued to live under the same brutal system of voter suppression. They organized freedom schools in their communities. They taught each other how to pass rigged and impossible literacy tests. They were beaten, jailed, fired from their jobs, and evicted from their homes simply for trying to exercise their basic rights. Some were murdered just for trying to register to vote, but the fight continued in the spirit of Ida B. Wells Barnett. Then came March 7th, 1965, known forever as Bloody Sunday. Marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge were beaten. The nation watched the horrifying violence in shock. 5 months later, President Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act into law. The new law outlawed poll taxes, literacy tests, and grandfather clauses. Federal officials would now enforce voting rights. By the end of 1965, 250,000 new black voters had registered, 1/3 by federal examiners. 45 years after the 19th Amendment was ratified, 95 years after the 15th, the promise was finally real. Ida B. Wells Barnett did not live to see that day of victory, but her tireless fight over decades helped make it possible. For nearly a century after her death, Ida B. Wells was largely forgotten. Her name was erased from most suffrage history books. Susan B. Anthony got statues in her honor. Elizabeth Cady Stanton got schools named after her. Ida B. Wells got only silence. But her great-granddaughter, Michelle Duster, fought tirelessly to change that injustice and restore her ancestors' legacy. In 2020, Ida B. Wells was posthumously awarded a Pulitzer Prize for her courageous and groundbreaking journalism. A monument now stands proudly in Chicago. Schools across America bear her name. Her face decorates Washington's Union Station. And her words still echo through history. The way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. Never stop fighting. She helped women win the right to vote. She was told she could not use it herself, and she kept fighting anyway until the end. If this story moved you, hit subscribe to this channel. There are more forgotten heroes from American history waiting to be told. Drop a comment below and tell me, what other stories from American history do you think deserve to be remembered and told?